Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our live Monday night special from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is going to be a very special show. We've got some interesting new, I don't know what you want to call it. I wouldn't call it evidence. The trial is over. We're talking about Bryan Kohberger, but there was some interesting new 3D renderings of the crime scene, of what, compiling together police reports, unnamed sources. This is the same individual who did the 3D rendering for the Dateline episode. That has been released. And Kevin Fixler, your favorite, you guys can't get enough of him. He texted me and said, we got to talk about this. If you're free Monday, let's get online and talk about this, because this is really fascinating stuff. I watched the video after he sent it to me, and I was blown away, because it really is. I'll tell you, we'll give some responses to it later, but my first reaction was almost making me more regretful that they didn't take this to trial, given kind of the way we're able to piece everything together now. Anyhow, that's what we're going to get into tonight. So I'm glad that you guys are all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello to everybody in the chat, to Hazel and Afton and Cheryl and Mary Jubinville, Zarcasm and Susie D, and also hello to our friends on X and Facebook. Thank you for being here. My name is Joshua Ritter. I am a former prosecutor with the LA District Attorney's Office. I was there for 10 years. I am a criminal defense attorney. I've been doing it nearly as long. This is Courtroom Confidential, where we try to present to you both sides of the courtroom, and we hope that we do that. Before we begin, and before I bring Kevin on, we don't think that it would be appropriate for us to at least not acknowledge the incredible tragedy and loss of life taking place in Texas. So if there are any of our listeners, or you have friends or family there, please know that we are sending our prayers and thoughts to them. It's absolutely mind-blowing what is being suffered by individuals out there. All right. Let's go ahead and bring on Kevin. Of course, stay to the end. We have announcements for you guys. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, but without any further delay. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Well, you always say your group is so excited to see me, but I've been on enough that they're probably getting tired of me.
No, they are excited to see you. They every time we announce that we're having you on, we get a great response from everyone, because, well, you're a pleasure to speak with, and you always know everything about this case. I wanted to do this anyways. I wanted to kind of have a debrief episode between you and I, because we were both in Boise together. We finally met for the first time in person. We know that we're not AI bots. I actually shook your hand. There we are. Look at us in the flesh. Happened to meet up at what I think was the only, no, that's not true. It did seem funny that everybody congregated at this one bar and restaurant that we all seemed to find, but it was really nice. What was the name of it? We should give them a shout out. Percy?
That's Percy. They're owned by a group of California restaurateurs who have come to Boise and been super successful, opening all sorts of, oh boy. No, they're great people. A good friend of mine is the bar manager, actually. And
you know them well.
I don't know the owners, but I know the bar manager, who's actually from Colorado. And the way his name's Tim. He's a great guy. There's a little chance he's watching, but I'll give him a shout out. But the way I met him was at a sister restaurant, and he had a Colorado Avalanche tattoo on his arm. And we met that way, and I'm from Denver originally. So I was like, oh, no, you're an Avs fan. All right, man. So anyway, over my left shoulder there, you see Mike Ruiz from Fox. That was my first opportunity to meet him, too. So it was kind of a meeting of the minds among a group of us after the hearing day.
Yeah, Kevin asked me if I could join them for a drink, and it was fun to sit in with 3 journalists and hear them talk shop. And I got probably the closest feeling I'll get to when my wife has to hang out with me and all my lawyer friends, and we're all talking shop and just everybody talking about stories they're covering and who scooped who. It was a great conversation. I'm glad I got to peek into your world.
Yeah, the other was Mike Baker from the New York Times. It was obviously, let's not forget why we were all there and what brought us together. But it was fun to, you use the term talk shop, but kind of talk through the things that we were thinking about and speculating about the case and the different leads we were chasing, and kind of came clean about how that all worked out among the group. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a funny moment too because it was a surprise kind of ending for everyone. Not that it exactly is the end, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it was a surprise moment nobody was expecting, and so everybody kind of rushed into town to cover it. And of course, we're talking about the change of plea hearing for Bryan Kohberger. So last Monday, a week ago, isn't that crazy? A week ago today, you and I were talking because it had broke earlier that day. Brian Entin had sent out a tweet saying Kohberger's going to have a plea. He's going to plead guilty, and we all kind of reacted to that. And I remember you and I were chatting that evening and just kind of talking about how in the world could that take place. You actually had the letter in your hand at that moment that was sent to the family members. And then by that Wednesday, we were all in Boise to cover this thing. I was outside the courtroom. And so one of the reasons I did want you to come back on was you were actually inside the courtroom when that all took place. Can you share with us just kind of, first of all, what was the atmosphere like, both outside and inside?
Yeah, sure thing. This was a first come, first serve situation. The trial was intended to be on a lottery system each day, like buying tickets on Ticketmaster is kind of a way to describe it. And they weren't even prepared. I mean, you talk about not being ready or the surprise of this whole thing. The courthouse was not even prepared to get their system underway. And so it was first come, first served. I don't know how early people began lining up, mostly members of the media, but it was in the early hours. And I got there, Mike Baker actually got there about an hour before me, and he said there's already 21 people in line. And I think it was 5:30 in the morning. So
Wow.
I was already planning to get there about 7. The hearing was scheduled for 11 a.m. local time, and I knew I needed to rush over just to make sure I got my spot in line. And as far as outside the courthouse, as you saw, it was, it was the circus came to town. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just not something that Idaho or Boise is really prepared for. The courthouse has a big exterior, kind of an entry point, brick walkway for media setup and interviews and press conference type things. But there were already media tents lining that. And everybody was really trying to fight for their real estate out there. The courthouse opened at 8. The line entered, and then we basically went from one waiting area to a holding pen, essentially, up on the 5th floor. We waited for the hearing to start for many hours. The line grew and grew and grew, including members of the public. I don't know how many ultimately got in, but I think it was about 50 members of the public. But again, that was largely members of the media. And of course, there were spots guaranteed to various immediate family members and additional people. This was reported, but not widely, but actually one of the surviving roommates was also in the courtroom. And
really?
the roommate who had given eyewitness testimony, or not testimony, excuse me, but eyewitness accounts to police on who she had seen in the house. So
Wow.
she was there, and I've confirmed that more than once. And we have a photo of her as well, so I know it was her. But we entered. The hearing was scheduled for 11. It was very tight security. There were 10 bailiffs in the courtroom. One at each entry point, and also in front of the Kohberger's parents were there. I was actually seated randomly, almost directly behind them, and they were sitting just to, I guess, his right. It's kind of an odd courtroom where it's an L shape where he's sitting, and then the prosecution is facing the judge directly. And so
I'm
yeah,
glad.
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm glad you described that, because I find the way they had the camera set up, it was really hard to orientate yourself to what was taking place in the courtroom, because the angles didn't seem to match up. So I finally figured it out the way that you described it. The judge is kind of facing the audience, and to his right, but not facing the judge, was the defense, and then in front of him and facing him was the prosecution, correct?
Yes, let's see if I can do this so my head is Judge Hippler, and the defense was on this side here, and then the prosecution is sitting right here in front of them, where Bill Thompson gave his oration about the facts of the case. And then all of us, so stacked behind him were two of the lead detectives and mostly media. And then you had another row over this way, another section where a lot of the family, the victims' families were situated. But Kohberger was right here. So again, my head to orient people is Judge Hippler.
Right.
And then I was seated over here in this section. There's a gap right here. And then I was seated right here, and Bryan Kohberger's parents were front and center in that row. And it was we obviously try to maintain our objectivity. I don't mind sharing. I mean, it was a tough watch. It was difficult to be right in their orbit as they experience this with them, because I think a lot of people have referred to Kohberger's words and perhaps lack of emotion or actions as being robotic. It's very chilling, cold, and that was the experience. It was hard to watch, and then, like I said, to see his parents, who I would say were filled with emotion and yet held back. It was quite a dichotomy. Yeah, it's not something I'll soon forget. So we entered real quick. We entered,
Yeah.
I was supposed to start at about 11. There was a second bag check. I mean, no water bottles of any kind were allowed. They were really restrictive. They checked our bags, and we all kind of flooded in. And it was about, I think, 11:14. Judge Hippler enters, and that was when Kohberger came and joined as attorney, sitting between Ann Taylor, closest to me, and then at the seat for Kohberger, Elisa Masseth, his longtime attorney, and then Becca Barlow, the expert on DNA from San Francisco. She was at the farthest left. And, it was off we go. Many who watched know that Judge Hippler talked a lot about him and his office receiving phone calls at the direction of the Gonsalves family, upset with this plea deal and no trial and no death penalty possibility. And he was angry. You could tell he was very frustrated that his lines had been tied up. I heard secondhand that the court system had to shut down the phone line, which he said had really interrupted operations overall, including in other cases, and it affected other victims and the judicial process overall. So he laid into that before we got going.
Yeah, I thought that was he's a very reserved judge, like not the type of judge that really loses his temper or something. And so that was about as you could tell that was his judge speak for kind of not wanting to tolerate any further actions like that. And I don't know, I know some people have been critical, saying, listen, you got to give these people some space to react the way that they're reacting. But there's a difference, I think, to important to point out between people reacting and even kind of protesting or having strong feelings about it, and then just laying all of that at the feet of the courthouse and the judge himself, and now making him in a way kind of a target. And I think that's what he was responding to. I'm curious. So were you able to see the victims or those who were in the courtroom, the victims' family members, from where you were seated?
Where the door was and where I entered before one of the bailiffs directed me that direction, just based on filling in space. I passed by Christy Gonsalves directly to my right, and kind of like the back row of that latter section that sat to the right of the prosecution. Ashley Jennings, the senior deputy for Bill Thompson, was on the furthest right to that table. I know. So when we were waiting to get in and have our bags searched yet again, many of the victims' families passed by and were let in by a bailiff. And so I was able to spot several people who I was familiar with. Another member of the Gonsalves family, Aunt Tammy is kind of how she's known. She came by. I saw Ben Mogan, Madison Mogan's father. I saw the Laramies, which is her mother, Karen, and Scott, her stepfather, who she was mostly raised by with her mother. I saw them walk by, and there were some other, maybe not immediate family members, but that was largely the group that came in first, and then we came in after. So as I came in on my right, that's where many of them were seated, and then I was directed to my left. So from my vantage, basically on the far left of the courtroom, I guess it would be Judge Hippler's far right, I could not see the victims' families and how they were responding or reacting. I did see media reports. They were teary-eyed and emotional, as you could expect, as Bryan Kohberger said yes to the allegations each time and admitted guilt to each of the 4 names as Judge Hippler read them. But I could not see them directly. There was nothing was audible. You didn't hear loud crying or anything like that. And Judge Hippler had stated, no outbursts, nothing emotional in terms of anything that would get you kicked out and not able to attend further proceedings. So I could not see that. But like I said, I was in direct vantage of the Kohbergers. His sisters were not there, his 2 older sisters, but his mother and his father.
I will say that I expected the hearing to be fairly straightforward. A change of plea is usually a very straightforward, kind of almost boring hearing to hear. I mean, it's, an advisement of rights, a waiver of rights. They take a plea. Maybe you hear from the defendant speak once or twice. Do you understand all your rights? Yes. Do you waive them? Yes. How do you plead guilty? Certain things like that. But this was a little bit more because the judge, and I don't know if that's the practice in Idaho or not, but the judge did. I mean, we counted it. It was something like a dozen or so times. I think Kaylin actually knows the number of how many times the judge actually spoke to him and had him admit, this was premeditated. You entered with the intent to kill. Did you in fact kill? All of, things along those lines. And so we got to hear from him, I guess is my point. We got to hear his voice and hear him speak more often than you would in a typical hearing that I'm used to, at least. And you pointed this out. Everybody's pointed this out. I don't know what we were expecting, but it was somehow more chilling than I could have imagined, just based upon the pure lack of emotion that he seemed to have. The almost unbothered affect he had by the whole thing. He was very clear. He was very responsive and engaged. It wasn't like he was just, kind of down on himself and paying attention to other things. He was very much responsive and engaged with the judge and answered directly and clearly. And something about that ease in which he did that, and maybe we're reading more into it than is true, but there was something about that just made it so much more bone chilling to me. And I know watching it, I watched it on a little monitor from outside because we were going to respond to it on the news. I'm just curious if it had that same chilling effect inside the courtroom to hear him finally admit to these things.
I mean, this was foreshadowed, right?
Yeah.
We learned about this through this plea agreement. I mean, I hate to call it a leak, but this didn't get out because the prosecution wanted it to get out, but it was because members of the families had received this letter from the prosecution acknowledging this plea deal. And Brian Enton was first. He got that out for News Nation. And then I believe ABC News, Kana Wentworth, was right on his heels, and Fox News pushed it out as well. And I was traveling in Denver, as your viewers know, and I was already scheduled with you to come on, but I mean, it totally turned what we were going to discuss on its head completely. And my colleague, Alex Brizzi, was able to get a copy of the letter from one of the family members. We were able to independently confirm it aside from what the Gonsalves family issued on Facebook. Basically, it's true, and beginning into their frustrations about this situation. And in the courtroom, I think there was an understanding that this is the direction it would go. Bill Thompson did note in that letter, this is the expectation, but you can't know what a defendant is going to do until they're faced with the moment. But Bryan Kohberger met it directly. He didn't waffle. It was clear from his, the audible level of his voice. He was not unconfident in the moment. And, I'm a reporter. I'm there to observe and to do that as best as I can in the moments. And again, the things I was paying the most attention to were him, Judge Hippler's words, to the extent I could see Bill Thompson over his left shoulder, watching him, and also watching, pardon me, the reactions of those around. And the thing that really helped me understand the moment the most was at the far left of the prosecution table is a deputy attorney general. Her name is Madison Allen. I think she's about 31 years old. She's blonde. Some will recognize her. And she sat at the far left of that table. And the thing that really struck me was that she was watching very closely as Bryan Kohberger was asked each time, whether it was the individual names or the various counts. She stared into his eyes. She would look up at Hippler and then look directly to her left and watch Bryan Kohberger as he delivered his responses. And I could just sense how struck she was, which really helped me to capture the moment in my mind, aside from watching the what I can only describe as really heartache that his parents were experiencing.
Wow. I don't want to get into like a play-by-play of everything that took place, because there's other things we want to discuss, but a couple last questions I have on this. Bill Thompson got up and gave this, what I've described as basically what was the outline of his opening statement. It was the evidence that they had. He outlined it most likely in the way that they would have outlined it in an opening statement. It struck me that at points he acknowledged things they didn't know, kind of discussed things that they were not able to prove and gaps that they may have had in their proof, but he walked through everything that they believe took place. I'm again not so familiar with Idaho and if that's always a part of a plea or not, but it was at least something that I am glad that they were able to recite in court. But at the very end, he named all of the victims and he talked about again, it seemed to me like an opening statement in the way that it even concluded. And his voice broke. And it was very obvious to everyone, even through the television lens, that he was having a tough time emotionally struggling at the very end there. And this is a guy who's about as experienced as any prosecutor is ever going to be. What was there any reaction to that in the courtroom? Or do you have any insights to share with us about that kind of moment when it really became, even from this, gentleman who's shown very little emotion through all of this, showed a lot of emotion?
Yeah, you could sense it. And, our ears were functioning the same way that the microphones were and what people were witnessing through the live stream. And there was a moment where Bill Thompson caught himself and took a sip of water from a paper Solo cup that was right in front of him. He even excused himself just for a quick moment. And it was, at the very tail end of what he was going to say. We didn't know that when he took that little break. And then he finished, got through it. His voice became softer, particularly as he said Xana Kernodle last. He almost didn't get the last name out. And then the way I described it in my story from the day was that he sort of collapsed into his seat. And to his direct left was Josh Hurwitz, the former U.S. Attorney of Idaho, who's been on this case from the very beginning as well. So that's an appointed position by the U.S. president. And at the time, that was President Biden. So he had that role for about 2.5 years. And that was the entirety of this investigation. And that role participates or interacts and helps steer the FBI when they're involved in a case like this. So he's been on it since day one. And then when it's a presidential appointment, so it's political in nature. And when you have the transition of presidencies or at least political parties, that person typically steps down. It's just sort of the natural process. And so President Trump has now appointed someone else who is waiting their Senate confirmation. And Josh Hurwitz has since stepped down from that role, and he joined the prosecutor's office with Bill Thompson. So he went from the top federal prosecutor in Idaho to kind of a lowly county prosecutor in order to see this thing through. And to get to the point, Bill Thompson finished. You could tell that he was having an emotional moment as he wrapped up. And I watched Josh Hurwitz put his hand and almost caressed. I mean, it was a patting of his back on Bill Thompson as he sat. And that just was a signal that you knew that not only was Thompson having a moment, but others were having it with him and feeling for him as he delivered what would have been the state's evidence in this case.
Wow. I mean, yeah, this, you as well, a lot of people have been living with this whole thing for years and it absolutely consuming their lives. I mean, everybody, but, prosecutors as well, this became what they lived and breathed every single day. And to be seeing it to its final conclusion here, it has got to be a very emotional moment. Okay, last thing on this, and then I want to get to this video, because this video is, again, shocking. Not shocking is not the right word. Really eye-opening, the information that we kind of see it all played out, and really well done too. Was there anything outside the courtroom afterwards, aftermath? People have exited the courthouse now. Anything about that you can share with us about the atmosphere or anything that you observed?
Yeah, the families were allowed to exit beforehand, and the order was the people closest to the door. So it was the victims' families, and they have court-appointed folks who assist with that. Bailiffs were with them, and then the Kohbergers, Michael and Marianne, they walked out last among those groups. So they exited, and then it was the kind of the free for all for the media to exit. And I followed the lead of someone else, which was that it was probably smarter to race down the stairs than it was to take the elevator. So I was running down the stairs to get outside as quickly as I could. And all you had was a literal wall, Josh. It was just a wall of video cameras waiting for anyone who would make it out in terms of family and maybe do a press conference. And none of that was disclosed or talked about beforehand. We do know that the Chapin family was not going to speak. We had heard that ahead of time. This was the first hearing they had ever attended, as far as I know. And I've been at many of them, most, in fact. I'd never seen the Chapin family. And so this was their first, but they said ahead of time, we're not going to be speaking. And then I know that the Laramies came out. So again, that's the mother and stepfather of Madison Mogen. They offered some words through an attorney about how they support the plea deal. And it's an important reminder for folks that these four families are split evenly. So two were in support of this plea deal, ultimately, the Chapins and the Laramies, and that also includes Ben Mogen and his family, so the Mogans. So that's kind of a two-parter there for Madison Mogen's family were supportive. And then Xana Kernodle's father had a comment for the New York Times. I saw also reports of her aunt had also come out against the plea deal, that they wanted a trial, more answers, and also the death penalty. And then, of course, the Gonsalves family has been most vocal about not feeling that their wishes have been honored. And so Steve Gonsalves did not attend the hearing. He sort of put up a protest outside, gave a kind of a press conference essentially before the hearing, and then awaited his wife coming out with the rest of their family. There you go. And then they exited. And I got out quickly enough to see video TV cameras kind of following them across the street where they had parked their vehicles. And I raced across the street. I had a journalism professor many years ago who told me, you always want to wear comfortable shoes. They might, you want to wear nice ones, but you want to wear something you can run in. And that was kind of a message to women in particular about heels if they were uncomfortable, but I never forgot it. And I raced across a busy street in front of the courthouse and met up with them and watched as they exited. And again, we know that there was this split among the families. And the thing I noticed as the Gonsalves family packed up and left between two vehicles was that on the SUV that Christy was driving, you could see in the rearview mirror. And it's kind of that, that paint people put on vehicles to celebrate graduations, or maybe, just married, whatever that is, that stencil. And on it, it said, honk for justice was the primary message. And then there were names. They had their daughter, they had Xana Kernodle, and they had Madison Mogen. And then it said hashtag Idaho 4. So absent from the vehicle was Ethan Chapin's name, I happened to notice. And I would say they've been the most vocal about supporting the plea deal. So we can draw our own conclusions about that. But, and obviously a very difficult situation, and how, unpredictable and kind of odd to have a direct split among these families on what the wishes were, and how this ultimately, in a very surprise fashion, how this all shook out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've said this many times. Each one of these families is allowed to grieve and handle this however they want. In my view, they can have the space to handle this as loudly or quietly as they want and say and do whatever they want, having suffered the kind of complete nightmare that they've suffered. And it is a tragedy that it doesn't seem like there may be conflict even amongst them, that they're not this kind of united front in the way that they're reacting to all of it. And I hope that they heal from that. And I hope that it doesn't remain that way, because it would be a tragedy on top of the tragedies that if that would cause, kind of continuous division amongst them. So thank you for
Real
sharing
quick,
all of that. Yeah,
yeah, for
please.
sure. But I saw that comment just come up, and somebody said they were surprised that nobody got photos of the Kohbergers. I assume they mean his parents who were there. There are entry points. The back entry point. Not everybody's entering in the front. All the victims' families had, but I think Kohberger's family, they're kind of in a unique spot. Again, this is the first hearing I've seen them at, and this was a big one, which I'm sure is why they flew in from Pennsylvania. But where they entered and exited, the media did not see any of that. So the opportunity wasn't there. And I happen to know the photographer who was there. We call it a pool photographer, and it's a single individual who has approval and got court permission. And he's a former Idaho Statesman photographer, and he was working freelance for the Associated Press. And he was actually under strict guidance not to take photos of anyone in the crowd. Even Judge Hippler was not part of the group who could be photographed in this instance. So it was specifically, you could take photos of Kohberger, and the guidance was basically to avoid attorneys best you can. So we don't have any photos of the prosecution from that hearing. We don't have any of Judge Hippler. We don't have any of the audience, including victims' families or Bryan Kohberger's family. And the focus was definitely on the defendant in this situation. But yeah, where the Kohbergers entered, his parents, and where they exited, not clear, but they were out of public sight, and definitely the TV cameras had no chance.
Yeah. Those we talked about this too. Those, it needs to be said, and it's true. Those people are victims as well. Their lives forever going to be altered, and even just carrying around the Kohberger name is just something they're going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. All right. Well, let's jump into this new video, because that was part of the reason that we wanted to jump on tonight. Before we do that, I want to welcome everyone. We've got a large group watching tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. You tuned in for a very interesting show. We're talking about the Kohberger hearing from last week. I was up there. Kevin was up there. Kevin is a investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman. He's been following this case from the very beginning, from the moment that the murders were reported. And has been doing some of the more, I would say, involved and tremendous breaking coverage of this case. And I was also up in Idaho to add some legal commentary on it for Fox News. So it happened just so happened to be that we were both up there, and we wanted to chat about it. But then the other thing we wanted to chat about is that there's been a newly released, I'm going to call it 3D CGI rendering of the crime scene. So this is Courtroom Confidential. My name's Joshua Ritter. I'm a former prosecutor, currently a criminal defense attorney. Thank you for joining us this evening. Let's get into this video. Kevin, this young lady right here, her name is Amber. I'm going to pronounce it Maune, and it's spelled Maune. She has a company called Azget Industries, Azget. We are pulling this from her YouTube channel. So I encourage everybody who's watching this to please support her, subscribe to her channel. She's trying to kind of grow her brand. This is the work that she does. Her YouTube channel is called Azget FX, Azget FX. We're also going to provide links and everything like that to her YouTube page. But she, you're going to hear right now, I'll play it and then we'll kind of periodically stop it and talk about it. But she talks about how she is the person who did the 3D FX rendering for the Dateline episode that we all remember. That was such a kind of remarkable insight into this case. And the part of it that was so incredible was this 3D rendering that they had of the crime scene. Well, she's now providing far more work that she did on that wasn't part of the episode. So we're going to go through that right now, and feel free to interject, Kevin, too, if you want to stop and add some thoughts on it, but I'll just kind of play it and we'll chat about it as we go along. Caitlin, is there any way to make the screen of the video slightly bigger? Perfect. Okay.
Hi guys, since Bryan Kohberger pled guilty today, I feel like we released this full illustration of the Idaho 4 crimes showing Kohberger's movements. It's put together by evidence given to me by media companies like Netflix and others, including more recently Dateline, who hired me to do their 3D modeling for their project. I'm going to include a lot of information into this episode where you can see exactly what took place from moment to moment. Let's get started. In this illustration, we're going to start at 3:30 a.m. At this time, everyone is asleep except for Xana. Looking inside the home, we can see where everybody was. Starting at the 3rd floor, we can see where Maddie and Kaylee were sleeping. Maddie was sleeping on the edge of the bed, while Kaylee was sleeping near the wall. As we go out and drop down to the 2nd floor, we can see Dylan's room directly under Maddie's room. Continuing across the living room onto the other side of the home, we see Xana's room. She's sitting in bed scrolling on her phone while Ethan sleeps next to her. Minutes ago, she had just finished ordering DoorDash and has all the lights on while she waits. The last roommate to mention is Beth, whose room is on the 1st floor, directly below the living room. As most of them all sleep, Kohberger pulls into the neighborhood for the first time this night at precisely 3:30 a.m. We know this due to a home security camera that captures the intersection and records the coming and going of anybody that enters that neighborhood. As we continue, Kohberger drives past the home and notices that all the lights on the 2nd floor are still on. He drives on and loops around the apartment complex building.
I want to stop it right here because one thing that immediately stood out to me, and maybe you already knew this, Kevin, we have seen that video footage, and that was in the Dateline episode before, of the car. But I was unclear as to where it actually was positioned because I couldn't tell what we were looking at, and they didn't do the greatest job of explaining that. But it sounds like that camera, if I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, might have been on this building here. Is that right? And it's kind of looking in this direction. If we have that map really quick, Kaylin, I don't want to mess you all up completely, but this was something that really stood out to me. So this is the oh, and I can't put my cursor over it. Anyhow, this is the what's tagged there is the home, and the car is coming in that video from the left to right. I didn't realize that we're watching it come down King Road from the top to bottom, then make a left onto Queen Road, and that's where we're seeing it turn as it goes towards the house, correct?
Yeah, so the orientation here, we see Taylor Avenue, and just north of that is a big field, and that's actually where on what we can't see on the map, but just north is the Sigma Chi fraternity house where Xana and Ethan were for the majority of the evening before they walked home. And then another thing that's interesting about this is that, and many have either gotten this wrong or been unclear about it, but Queen Road is actually, it's kind of a flag property is what the 1122 is and was, because it's no longer there, but it is, the address is King Road, but it is off of Queen. Yeah. And then what we're looking at is just where that symbol is there to distinguish the home. Just to the left of that is 1112 King, and that is where the camera is pointed to the left toward that angle of King Road, and that's where we see the video of the vehicle coming in. I know that police actually, when early days, we learned that they actually took the entire, I don't know if it was a Ring brand, but they took the Ring security camera in its entirety. They just took the whole thing off the wall and all of the data from it as part of their investigation.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, this is, so here, yeah, this right here that we're looking at, can you see my cursor on there? I don't know why. But that road that we're seeing run from the bottom right to the top left of our screen is Queen Road. And it actually appears as though the house is off of that, even though the address is on King Road. So he proceeds past it and then circles around that apartment complex, which is in the towards the top, just off of left of center, and circles around that. one other thing she's saying that's interesting. She does an excellent job of narrating this, but she is kind of adding, I would say, conclusions, but they're reasonable conclusions. For instance, she says he drives by seeing that the lights are all on. We don't actually have evidence of the lights being on, but it's reasonable as to why he's kind of circling around the way he does. It does appear as though he's casing the house.
Yeah, we've never known if the lights were on or off, assuming that people don't go to bed when it's light in their home. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption. But one other thing I want to point out, though, and it's been underscored before, but just to reiterate to people, but where the car is currently situated, that is a dead end. And so, where else was he going, or where was he planning to go back out of the neighborhood? He did circle and we have this from prior information, court records from the prosecution and actually the defense. They spoke to some of these things too, based on the evidence they had received through discovery. But the allegation, and now we know and believe to be true, was that he was coming in and out of that neighborhood, but then going back down Taylor and doing circles throughout the area. So this was, the first cycle, and she's about to explain the different timestamps and repeat entry into the neighborhood if he was looking for something particular before he exited his vehicle and struck, as it were.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted everybody to kind of orient themselves the same way that I needed to, and this was incredibly helpful. So I'll continue to play it here, but this was one of the first times watching this that it really started to make sense what we were watching in that video footage and what was actually happening in those moments leading up to it, which further to me convinced me of, the amount of planning and a kind of obsessiveness. And, I'm starting to think about this like a prosecutor, that I would have argued ahead of time had this thing actually gone to trial. But let's keep it playing here.
Because of the home security timestamp, we're able to know how long it took to drive this path. On his first pass, it took him 2 minutes and 38 seconds, and this is him leaving on the first pass.
This video, by
Now
the way,
let's
has
look at his
never been
next
seen
passes
before.
and record the times.
This security footage, it's never been shown.
The security footage that we're watching.
This right here, so Dateline, it was a revelation that Dateline had received this from a source close to the investigation, and so they showed the entry points at the the key time, which was 4:07,
right,
and then the exit of the car, like a bat out of hell, getting out of the neighborhood at 4:20, 4:21. But we've never seen this video before she revealed this. So this is brand new and also contributes to sort of the impressiveness of not only receiving it from those she was working with, but just, our first opportunity to ever see it. This is it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's the angle we've seen before, because we've seen prior clips from the Dateline, but now she's showing us clips the Dateline did not show, that I'm guessing she probably received from them at the same time, but it was just up to Dateline what they were going to use and didn't use, and perhaps just didn't want to go into this much detail.
Yeah, and she says that. She says that she received this from, I think she referenced Netflix, which I know the Gonsalves family has an agreement with them for some sort of documentary or something. So they must have it as well. But she referenced that, and then also Dateline had the full video, you have to assume. So
yeah.
Pass 2 of him entering and leaving. And now this is pass 3 of him entering and leaving. When we do the math, we can see how long he took each pass. The last 2 passes were normal without any stopping, but on his first pass, he took an additional 42 seconds to creep by the house, or even stop for a time to stare into the windows with the lights on.
Again, we don't know that, but probably a logical assumption.
All this information has been coming from camera A, but there is a second camera.
Okay, so that's great. She's now showing what camera A, where it was positioned, and what we're viewing, which was for me the first time I realized that.
Located behind the apartment complex building, and we're going to call that camera B, located here. This camera allows us to see how long it took.
So this is the Linda Lane camera many are familiar
with.
with.
Between the 3 security cameras data, it took between 35 and 37 seconds. What this means is you didn't stop or park somewhere or go into a different direction. He simply drove straight from point A to point B at regular speed. These times help us understand the DoorDash delivery window. According to court documents, 2 times are noted. One is 3:59 a.m. and the other is 4 a.m. Bringing back our passage chart, we can see that the DoorDash time of 3:59 happens after Kohberger has left the neighborhood and before he returns for his last pass at 4:04. It is possible that the DoorDash driver saw Kohberger as he was parking his car, because a timestamp of 3:59 could be reflected when he took the photo of the food at the front door instead of the time he arrived.
Okay, so she's referring to the DoorDash driver as a he. We now know it's a she. You were the one to kind of break this information that person had been revealed, at least publicly. It sounds like law enforcement was aware of her for some period of time. But do we know? I mean, she just made what a lot of us were assuming and hoping, had this gone to trial, that the DoorDash driver may have seen something other than just dropping off the food. Do you know anything beyond that? Like, she's making this, she's kind of drawing this conclusion that she may have seen him, because they nearly passed each other. I mean, it's amazing that the way this works out timeline wise, they are there within seconds of each other. So it's a very, I think, a fair assumption to make that she may have seen something.
Right. I mean, we've pointed this out before, and I was on your show to previously discuss this when I broke that news. But she says in the body cam video that she saw Bryan there, and we don't know what that means. Does that mean she saw a physical person? Does that mean she saw a vehicle? And then she followed up that to say that she parked right next to him. The thing we don't know is where she in this video, it's suggested that she parked in the driveway, which, don't forget there were multiple vehicles parked in that driveway at the time. So that's not represented here. But it would make sense if you're going to a home, you would either park, right at maybe the point of the driveway, or maybe even go on to there. And then, yeah, the 3:59 time that a photo was taken of the bag of food dropped at the door, or what have you, we can reasonably assume that she arrived shortly there before. And then maybe on her walk back to her car, she was a couple minutes behind that. And who knows, maybe she mulled about for a few moments and saw a white vehicle pass by. We don't know, and we may never know now because there is no trial. But it's just details that we don't know at this point. And it is reasonable that she could have seen him, and she had claimed so to a police officer.
Yeah, I don't know how much we can trust because we're taking a lot of this from that video where she's being, I don't even want to call it interrogated, but she's kind of seated there with a officer, and she's saying, she's kind of bemoaning the fact that she's going to be called as a witness, and kind of starts telling things. That's not what I would exactly call sworn testimony, or even testimony, even an interview being given to an officer. So who knows how true what she's saying right there is, but it does sound like she had seen something. And given this timeline, seems very reasonable too, but doesn't seem reasonable that it would have been like they were parked next to each other, as some people had maybe assumed from what she had said in that police video. That badge cam video is how I'm referring to it as. All right, let's continue this.
He witnessed Kohberger staring at the windows as he drove by. Continuing, as the driver leaves, Xena turns off all the lights, sits on her bed, and scrolls on her phone as she eats her food. A few minutes later, Kohberger enters the neighborhood for the last time. But this time, as he drives by the home, he sees all the lights are off. At the camera B location, he turns around to head back to the residence as shown in this video.
This was interesting to me, and I'm curious if you had heard about this too, that for whatever reason,
when he returns to the front of the house, he does something unusual, so much so that it's noted in the arrest affidavit. On page 6, it states, when the suspect vehicle 1 is in front of Kings Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. It goes on to say that he continued onto the intersection where he did a 3-point turn.
So that right there, I'd never heard before, and I'm curious if you were aware of that. The idea that he goes down to make what looks like another one of those loops. And somebody said, well, it's not a dead end. Well, it's a dead end in that you cannot get back out to the street unless you come back around. So he, instead of circling around the apartment as we believe he had done before, he makes a 3-point turn and comes back down the road, which is interesting to me. And then there's this idea that he may have pulled over in front of the home for a short period of time. Had you ever heard that before?
Yeah, so she points out that in the probable cause affidavit, it references a 3-point turn. So we did know that. In terms of me being able to conceptualize it, especially having not been out there when that, well, I had been out there by that point, but we just didn't know. I didn't grow up in Moscow or anything. I walked that neighborhood any number of times following the crime. But before seeing this visualization, I hadn't really understood exactly where it was or how that might have played out.
Yeah, me neither. That's why this was so helpful to me. He does something else here, which is curious too. I mean, he's kind of got this pattern. He's circling, he's thinking about it, working himself up, trying to make sure that the house is closed down before he goes back in. All reasonable assumptions, I feel. But then on this last pass, he makes this weird 3-point turn to come back. He pauses at the house, and then he does something right here, which is not normal for him as well.
It is a cramped area.
The 3-point turn was captured on camera A, which has a timestamp of 4:06.
Here, can you pause for a quick
moment? Calm and not overly.
I'm going to make an interesting point, and this actually ports over to the alternate suspect theory. We don't know who those 4 people were. It is likely that one of them was Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Where the car is pointed right now, from my vantage, from right to left, so the headlights are pointing into that cul-de-sac. Kaylee's boyfriend lived in that home, just to the right of the one that we can see that's lit up. He lived that close.
Wow.
So, and I know that through public records I got from the police department. He was, of course, scrutinized and explored as a potential suspect. I don't know if he was one of the 4 that the defense had submitted, but we do, of course, know that police looked very closely at him, interviewed him. Steve Gonsalves had raised questions about him, that he needed to be cleared, and then police very early in said that he had been cleared. But yeah, that's how close he lived.
And just to be clear too, those are of course going to be the immediate suspects. I mean, it's going to be every boyfriend, every close person, anybody, that's just the way police works. And so it's, there's no shock in the idea that he may have been not even a suspect, but a person that they wanted to thoroughly vet early on in this investigation. Johnny Knoxville says, do we think that BK parked on the slope to the left of the house or behind the house? My impression was behind the house on the dimly lit pad by sliders.
So we're going to get
ahead of us. You're getting ahead of us, Johnny. Great question. And you're about to find out. But this was weird to me before we move on from this point, because why not circle around as he had done before? But instead, this time, where it does seem as though he's now made the decision to go back to the house and do what he's planning on doing, he decides to instead make this 3-point turn to come back rather than turning to the right as he has before. I know you don't have the answer to that, but I thought it was curious.
Well, but what we do have right here is the timestamp, 4:06:55. And we know that the car entered at 4:07 is how it was described into the neighborhood. So again, this is all brand new footage that nobody has seen before this release. And rather what we've seen is the car passing sort of this grate on the front porch from the vantage of 1122. We had never seen the 3-point turn before, though. Dateline, again, had acquired this, we think, and then gave it to her. But we've never seen the 3-point turn itself. So this is, I mean, it was, these are new revelations in many ways. And that's what also contributes to how impressed I am by this designer's work.
I'm impressed by it too. And I'm also impressed by imagining how this would have played out in court. I mean, this is pretty incredible stuff that they are able to, through timelines, through the small amount of surveillance they were able to capture, they put together much more of a narrative of what took place beforehand than I had even realized. Do we know this home that we're looking at, where this camera is positioned? Do we know what that is? Is that just another kind of fraternity home in the area?
So, I mean, they're not owned by the fraternity or the sororities. It's not Greek life, but what I've described this little neighborhood as is sort of Greek life runoff. And that's where once people move through the Greek system, the years that they either want to or need to live in the various homes. And the new Greek row is not, so there's two. The new one where where Sigma Chi is just across the way there, that's part of New Greek Row. There's another Greek Row closer to campus. But then this is where many of those sorority and fraternity brothers and sisters then move into these homes together. And this was a home where several women, and I think even a guy or two also lived.
Interesting. All right, let's get to what happens next here, because this is where it really starts to get graphic and fascinating.
Anxious with his driving.
And we see the pumpkins
As he
right
heads
there,
back
by the
in
way.
the direction of the
It's
residence,
November.
He takes one last look at the windows to
Good
make sure
point.
all the lights are off. As he begins to drive around the end of the apartment complex, camera B records the time of 4:07. Fast forwarding a little bit, Kohberger drives to the back parking lot away from other residences.
To Johnny's question from earlier.
And that lot
He
is
takes a few
generally
minutes
full.
looking around and sees that nobody's out and that all is
You've been out there, correct?
Many times. Yeah, that parking lot is really reserved for the people who live in that apartment complex. It's just to the right there,
Gotcha.
which is it's a two-story actually. That kind of has the appearance of three, but there are steps that lead to the second floor. And yeah, I mean, this would be filled with cars parked diagonally. So it's not represented here, but and there are some spots available, and perhaps that was one. But from that vantage, you'll see actually when we roll back through this, you'll see from that vantage, you can see directly onto the balcony and into the home.
So that's exactly what I was going to ask you, is that this parking is not where you would naturally go park if you were going to go visit that home. Where you would park is where they showed the DoorDash driver parking earlier, right? If you had business at that home, you're probably not going to circle around to the back and up above it and through the trees to park in this kind of apartment parking, correct?
It kind of depends on
how busy it is.
Well, I mean, I was going to say it depends on your purpose, but I don't mean that in any sort of gratuitous way in terms of Bryan Kohberger was trying to hide himself. I mean, I'm sure that's what he was doing, but yeah, I mean, friends could park on in the driveway, but that, again, to reiterate a point, it is a cramped neighborhood. There's not a lot of street parking. You can't just park randomly. I mean, there's that parking lot where we see the allegation that he parked there. There's some minor street parking, and then there's really, you'd have to leave the neighborhood a bit and walk, which I had to do in the past because it is just so jam-packed with cars paralleling in the limited public parking. So you would either have to find a spot up there or you'd have to circle and park elsewhere in that neighborhood.
When you park up there where they're showing the car right now, how do you get down to the house? Is there a pathway, or do you literally have to go hike through those trees there?
So every time I've been there, and everyone will understand this, there was police tape up. And so you couldn't walk down what we're about to see the video display, which is that he walked directly down the tree-lined area here, which is kind of a slope. Typically, I would park up here when I couldn't find a spot for reporting purposes. And then I would walk down, to the left of this vehicle and walk down that path and then come back around to basically the driveway.
Gotcha.
And so that would be the natural path. But I believe this video, because I've seen it a few times now, I believe it shows him in all black walking down the slope, which would have been possible.
Okay. Yeah, let's get to that then. But I agree with you that to, again, try to draw conclusions from his actions, this is where somebody would park if they wanted to be both secluded but also have a good vantage point of the home. And likely be able to walk up to the home, not on a public street, right? He's not like no other homes are going to really notice him walking from his vehicle to this home at this time at night from where he's parked.
Yeah, I mean, let's remind ourselves, this was 4:07 a.m. How many people are up? Very few.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we can assume he's trying to stealthily get into the home.
Yeah.
Away from other residences. He takes a few minutes looking around and sees
you can
that
see where you
nobody's
see the
out
balcony
and that
from
all
there
is
on
quiet.
the left.
He eventually grabs his things, gets out of the vehicle, and begins walking to the back of the home.
That's what I was
At
saying
approximately
about going
4:13
through the
a.m.,
trees.
he begins to make entry. As he steps in, he takes a minute to make sure everything is quiet and that nobody is truly up. He walks to the entrance of the living room and looks around. He continues to be cautious and stands there listening. Feeling confident, he continues upstairs.
Again, many people have talked about this. Madison seems to have been the target. A lot of reasons to believe that, but one of them is that on that floor that he's there, right there, is a bedroom right off from the staircase. If he was just going in there to mindlessly murder, there's a bedroom right there, but instead he starts with the top bedroom, so had to actually pass a bedroom to get to Madison's room.
Right. There's actually 2 bedrooms on each floor. So in this case, there was Xana's on the floor that he entered, and also the second floor roommate. And
right,
this was described by Steve Gonsalves a long time ago, assuming that his daughter was the target in some regard. That why did he go to the 3rd floor first? That he said that a long time ago, and Bill Thompson revealed that during the hearing, the change of plea hearing, that Kohberger entered and went directly to the 3rd floor. It was a detail included in the Dateline episode, and it was something confirmed by Bill Thompson at the hearing.
Yeah.
Makes his way to Maddie's room. The time is about 4:14. Meanwhile, 2 minutes later, Xana takes a break from TikTok and walks into the kitchen. Evidence shows her activity on the app stopped at 4:16. As she enters the kitchen, she's a little shocked to see the sliding glass door wide open. And at the same time, she hears a serious commotion going on upstairs. Hey everyone, I don't usually ask, but I'm building a small production company to bring you more exciting stories, and I'd love your support. If you'd like to help out and get some cool perks, or own the 3D model file I created for this animation, please send me a DM and then drop a hashtag Azget in the comments so I know to look for your messages. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you.
Can we pause for a
Picking
second?
up where we left off.
Yeah.
A source revealed that...
So 2 interesting details here. We don't know it definitively, but that the door was left open. I can't tell you if that's true or not, but she probably has insight into that. That's one thing. And then the other really interesting detail is that data from Xana's phone, according to her and probably her sources, shows that she got up and about and walked into the kitchen. I've never heard that before. Nobody has. It was never revealed in any documents. We don't know that. And what an incredible and fascinating piece of information that you can acquire from data on someone's cell phone. And you know that they scoured each and every one of the victims, Kohberger, and this, as they built the narrative. I mean, perhaps that's something would have revealed at trial.
Yeah, and someone made a comment earlier too that if it's true that he was going by the home and kind of looking for signs of them all being asleep, and then, you know, maybe she turns off her light or whatever, and if he was able to see the DoorDash delivery, he's going in there within moments of there being activity in that home. It's again, I know we're making a lot of speculation here, but it's curious to me as to it's almost like he ran out of patience is the point I'm trying to make. It's almost like he couldn't wait any longer and he was just going to go in there because he is in there, according to what you just said, with another person who's awake, who he could have run into, who could have offset his plans entirely. And in fact did to some extent, it sounds like. And it's not to mention how chilling it is for Xana in these final moments to be awake while some of this is happening and hearing it while somebody is in the home. Just nightmarish type stuff.
Xana's phone recorded steps and elevation change. which is how it's known she went to the kitchen and the third floor. When she walked up to Maddie's doorway, she interrupted Kohberger, who had just finished an intense battle with Kaylee, who fought back violently. After a second or two, he notices her, and then she turns away. Being dark, Xana didn't realize what she was seeing other than a shadowy figure. Out of fear, she quickly leaves. A single source, unaffiliated with the media, claims Kohberger injured Xana on the third-floor hallway, leaving evidence of blood there.
That was something I'd never heard before. Were you aware
No.
of that? Okay.
No.
So now, and I'm curious if you can decipher this, reporter speak, single source unaffiliated with the media. What does that mean to you? That seems like very carefully chosen words.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it is. I think we need to think through this. Where did she get the information? She disclosed that she heard from Netflix and Dateline, and those. Let's group those. That's media, I suppose, new age sort of and old school. But I don't know. She's not referencing a reporter. I guess she could be referencing law enforcement, but you would think that law enforcement source would have given that to Dateline, and that's how she got it. Perhaps a family member who is familiar with the information. I'm not sure. It's worth reiterating. Dateline reported that Xana walked up to the third floor and witnessed what was going on. And then they suggested that he had chased her down to her room. We're about to see this play out, but down the stairs, raced her and got to her room with her, where they end up having it out, is what was suggested on Dateline. So she's going in more depth and explaining that there had been an initial injury on the third floor. That's not something that Dateline described either. So we don't know that this is absolutely true. I want to reiterate that because it wasn't revealed in court. It's not in the records. It wasn't talked about in pretrial. So she probably has it right. I have to make that assumption based on everything she has. But this is, again, new information we had never heard before.
And to your point, I had always wondered, there was a lot said in that Dateline episode that I'm like, well, how did they know that? They were just kind of, for instance, you said Xana confronted them upstairs, then she ran downstairs and he chased her. And I'm like, well, how did they know that? They don't have evidence of that. Well, maybe what they weren't telling us, but they knew at the time, is what she's revealing right here. It sounds like if there was blood from this single source unaffiliated with the media person, that there was her blood in that stairwell, then that does suggest that perhaps she was injured and perhaps running and then perhaps was being chased. So this is certainly kind of fleshing out what we heard in the Dateline episode. I'm going to go ahead and start it again here.
Claims Kohberger injured Xana on the third-floor hallway, leaving evidence of blood there. But the single source of information has not been validated by any more sources.
There you go.
Continuing, Kohberger, without thinking, pursues her all the way to her room, not realizing he had dropped the sheath of his knife. When he gets to the room, he attacks Xana, and the time is precisely 4:17:30. We know this because of camera A captured the sound of screaming and the thud.
Okay, that to me was also remarkable because we had heard that sound, that audio before, right? I remember that from early on. Now
it was in the Dateline episode.
That was in the Dateline episode, but hadn't we heard that before? Or was that the first time in the Dateline episode?
No, it's referenced in the probable cause affidavit. So that takes us back to December 29th of 2022, and it was released on January 4th, I believe, of 2023, as Kohberger was brought to Idaho. But we had not, before the Dateline episode, ever heard the actual sound. And then again, she has it. But incorporating it all and building this timeline and the narrative, it's incredible the way that we can see how this likely played out.
And what's also incredible is now knowing how far away that home is from the murder home, to have picked up the audio on that camera, if it's a Ring camera or whatever it is, that must have been fairly loud. I mean, in my view, when we were looking at that, what do you estimate the difference, the distances between those two homes? Got to be a matter of 50 yards or so, no?
Yeah, somebody probably who knows it in greater detail than I should chime in.
Okay.
Again, many people have followed this case closely. I believe it was 50 feet is something that's in my brain. It's really, the home is not where the camera is positioned is
feet,
not.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it's about 50 feet, somewhere in that, that ballpark. 50 feet based on where the camera is on that deck to, I guess as the crow flies, directly to the room where Xana's room where Ethan was also sleeping.
Still, my point being, we're not talking about a home that is directly abutted against the murder home. So that for it to have picked up this audio, that audio must have been fairly loud. So we're all wondering here, how do people not hear this? How do people not know what's going on in that home? There was loud enough commotion and screaming coming from that home that it picked up audio on a camera some 50 feet away.
Yeah, but I think if the question is, where was the other roommate on the second floor? How come she didn't hear it? She did. She did. And she opened her door 3 times. It was on the third time from commotion and things she heard and things she thought she heard, whether it was Kaylee playing with her dog or someone say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." The various things she told police, she was hearing these things to some extent. And based on what police have said and was discussed in court hearings, she had had a lot to drink for the majority of the day. And so, and it's 4 a.m., a tired college student. She heard enough to open her door and wonder what was going on. And we know that through the texts and the calls that we got transcripts for after the fact.
Yeah. No, I that's an excellent point that I think many times people, we question a lot about what the surviving roommates did. I don't think that's fair. And I think it's also, you have to acknowledge that they had been drinking all day. It was the middle of the night. Who knows how well they were perceiving all these things, or who knows how much of it they might have even been sleeping through, as hard as that is to believe.
Right. And I'll make one other point. Here's the other thing that everybody needs to think about, as we have now gotten to the point where Bryan Kohberger has acknowledged guilt. That roommate was right.
Yeah.
She was right. What she saw was correct.
Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. All right. Here, let me
attacking Xana.
Let me back this up for 1 second.
After attacking Xana,
I'm actually going to play that audio one more time now that we've talked about it.
We know this because of camera A captured the sound of screaming and the thud. After attacking Xana, Kohberger focuses his attention on Ethan and attacks him while he slept. Afterwards, Kohberger must have sat down in a chair, according to a report, which found blood smears on Xana's chair, perhaps from the exhaustion of what he had just done. This source also says that blood from the 2 roommates upstairs were found in Xana's room, showing that it was one person moving from one room to another. Kohberger sitting
First
down
time we
for
heard
less
that.
than 30 seconds.
Yeah. First time that we've heard it. The first time that we've heard that their blood was found in the second room. Yeah.
Yeah. That was not described in the Dateline episode specifically. What I find interesting, I mean, we had never known the order of the deaths. That was something that had long been unknown. Bill Thompson confirmed information that was described in the Dateline episode. Again, I presumed, I was left to presume that the information Dateline had was correct, because they had things like this video footage, and it was hard to argue that these selfies they had of Bryan Kohberger and they claimed were directly from his phone that were not him. People tried, and they did online, but come on. I mean, it was him. Now, whether or not it had anything to do with this or the history of it, I mean, who knows? Maybe it was from 4 years ago, but based on what Dateline said, that was him, came directly from his phone. All of this information seemed to be authentic, but we had never heard before that Kaylee and Maddie's blood was found in Xana's room, which helped police understand that he had gone up to the 3rd floor first, had killed both of them, and then came downstairs. I think the other interesting thing, though, think about if you're a police investigator. So you find Xana's blood on the 3rd floor. The opposite could be true. Perhaps he walks in, kills her, and then goes upstairs and her blood is in the hallway. I mean, that's something you have to contemplate, but they broke this all down and figured it out. And they do believe that the order was Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and then Ethan as he slept. Dateline described it as a single blow as he was sleeping. And then they mentioned that Kohberger had, I think, carved his legs up or something bizarre.
That was the word they used, was carved.
Yeah, and so that fits the description that Bill Thompson gave at the hearing, that each victim had multiple wounds, even though Dateline had described a single wound was the source of Ethan's death.
Yeah, and she says again here, he was asleep. So there, it appears as though the way that he was found, there didn't appear to be any struggle with him, which again goes to our point earlier about how much they had been drinking and how much they may have been sleeping through all of this. I mean, if you want to talk about what was the surviving roommates be able to perceive and hear, well, you've got Ethan in the room where apparently now we believe Xana was being murdered, and he doesn't even wake up. If you want to understand the level of intoxication some of them may have had.
Yeah, and gosh, we've all wanted to know what do those toxicology reports show? And now it raises that question again, if we'll ever know, if we'll ever see it.
Yeah. The other thing I think to point out is that when she's saying blood was found, well, that can mean a lot of different things. Blood can be a smear, blood can be droplets, it can be spatter, it can be all sorts of different types of blood evidence, which can tell mountains of evidence, mountains of information to a forensic, scientist who can reconstruct these things. They can even tell, oh, this is a drop of blood from a person who was moving at the time. And so that might have given them that information that she was running from the upstairs to the downstairs just based upon the pattern of blood. But all we're being told right now is just blood was found. I'm being reminded that we've got a lot of people watching, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're watching a video that was put together by a young woman by the name of Amber Mon. She has a channel called Azget Industries. It's on YouTube at Azget FX. She did a tremendous job. We're giving her high praise. Please subscribe and support her for putting this all together. And she is the person who put together the 3D CGI for Dateline, but this is kind of unused footage, I'm imagining, from that episode that really spells out everything. And I'm sitting here with Kevin Fixler from the Idaho Statesman going through all of that. So thank you, everybody who's joining us to watch this. Let's go ahead and I don't want to cut you off, Kevin, if you had something more to add, but let's go ahead and keep it going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
It's up to leave. Dylan, hearing the commotion from Xana's room, gets up out of bed and goes to her door to look out into the hallway. She freezes and sees Kohberger as he walks by and exits through the kitchen. She immediately closes and locks her door and retreats to her bed. Within 20 seconds of the encounter, she's calling and texting her roommates, but no one is responding. It takes Kohberger a minute and a half to get to his vehicle after the encounter with Dylan. But once in his car, he flees the scene at a high rate of speed and exits the neighborhood at 4:20.
Can you pause?
Yeah.
Dylan continues.
I'm just going to make a point here, and Bill Thompson referenced it too. We've seen the video of the car, high rate of speed. We knew about the high rate of speed from the probable cause affidavit. I can't recall if it's in this video or not. I think not, because she just showed the vehicle exit. If I have one critique of this video, based on the facts that we know, it's that there's no way to actually show the speed at which, to the extent as Bill Thompson described it, it's not even a question anymore. Bryan Kohberger almost lost control of his vehicle as he was getting out of there as fast as possible, just ahead of 421 as he makes that right turn. And if we think back, I mean, just even hypothetically, let's say he loses control of the vehicle and crashes into the home that's right there. We're talking a completely different scenario. And he pulled it together and made that turn, and then he makes a left and gets the heck out of there and heads toward Pullman. But it was that close.
It also makes you think of how, we've seen this man in court, and a lot of people have described him as emotionless and robotic. But in those moments there, you can imagine how just absolutely jacked to the hilt with adrenaline he must have been leaving that home. And just speeding away as fast as he can, that he's nearly losing control of a street on a corner that we've seen him made that turn at least 4 times before, just that very evening. So he is just kind of in the throes of this moment. And adding to that, it may have been, and it does sound like that to me, Kevin, that he may have gone in there with the intention of committing one murder and walks out having committed 4.
Thompson talked about that. It was, a revelation unto itself that he was not going to say, nor could the state prove that he had the intent of killing 4 people. And yet that was the end result.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that's absolutely true. It seems like it turned chaotic. Certainly the way that they're outlining it here, it seems like it turned chaotic at some point. And we know too that there was that at least Kaylee was not an expected guest in that home. Not expected that she would be in that bedroom. There is some evidence that maybe he wasn't expecting to find what he did.
I would agree with that. And we do know, including from her parents, that she drove down for the last football home game and the party that would ensue as a result. And she was there to show off her new Range Rover she had purchased and to be with her friends before she took an internship in Texas, I believe. And she wasn't even supposed to be there, which is, it contributes to the heartache over this situation.
Yeah. Incredible.
I will point out we're gonna finish this.
Yeah,
we're gonna get to it. Yeah,
time.
I do. I'm here with you guys and everybody who's viewing. Was so impressed by this video. I wanted to come on and break it all down with Josh. So thanks for having me. But I do want to say we do get into a little bit of speculation with regards to what happened to the murder weapon. We did find out definitively from Bill Thompson at the hearing that the state never found it, and I believe he actually said we haven't found it yet. That's how he put it. But I don't know that they're still searching at this point. They have a conviction and they have the guy, and he's going to be headed to prison for the entirety of his life at 30 years old. But where the knife ends up and where she kind of points where it could be, I mean, it's an interesting concept. I'll get it more into that area when we get there in the video, but none of this is proven, that little detail.
Yeah. Everything that kind of takes place after this point in the video, I was really curious to get your thoughts because it does seem like there's a far bit more speculation going on. Again, I think based upon reasonable assumptions and
timeframes.
Yeah. But it did seem like, okay, well, that's a bit of a stretch, but perhaps a great theory, but maybe not something that we actually know, which again, not to get into a full-fledged aside here, but why wasn't that part of the plea? Why wasn't a proffer and understanding and tell us where the murder weapon is part of the plea? And it apparently was not. Maybe down the line, he'll have that information, but it was kind of shocking to me that as Bill Thompson was speaking, there was so much unknown that he was talking about. And I'm thinking, well, the gentleman who knows is sitting about 12 feet away from you. So why don't we all know at this point? But I'm not going to throw further shade. Maybe we will get those answers and maybe we will have a recovered murder weapon if it's even able to be recovered. But let's get to that section now where she starts to talk about him and where he went afterwards.
He's trying to reach someone in the house. And after 3 minutes of trying, Bethany wakes up in response to the calls. They converse for 3 minutes and then Beth convinces Dylan to come downstairs. The time is now 4:26 a.m. Cautiously, Dylan walks into the hallway and through the living room. As she approaches the staircase, she can see into Xana's room and sees her laying on the floor.
We've heard that before.
She then runs quickly downstairs to Beth's room, where they lock the door, and for several hours, she was passed out, try contacting the other roommates.
And again, I know people are thinking to themselves, how in the world do you see that and think that? Well, you're not back in college and you're not back in those days where, people drinking too much and kind of falling asleep in bizarre areas is something that might be expected. Again, even all of that being said, I'm still kind of blown away that hearing what she heard, seeing somebody in the house, she didn't react differently, but I'm not going to attack these poor kids who've been through so much already. Yvonne says KB suffers from visual snow syndrome. Visual snow, a persistent flickering white, black, transparent, or colored dots could have been why he missed the roommate as he walked away. That is true. We do know he suffered from that. He talked about that quite a bit. And I know that Yvonne, you bring up a theory that a lot of people have kind of mentioned, that maybe he didn't see her there. Everybody goes, well, why did he leave her to live? Could be he had no idea. Could be it's a dark house, and even without the visual snow, he wasn't able to see her. He's in this fog of having just murdered 4 people savagely, and he's just trying to get out.
My coworker, Sally Krutzig, wrote a pretty in-depth story about that syndrome. It's available at idahostatesman.com if you look for it. If you searched maybe Kohberger and visual snow on our website, you would find that story that breaks down that disorder.
Interesting. And I think he even said that he had recently kind of been able to treat it or something, right? That it wasn't like a continuing problem like it had been for him in years past.
I believe he got over it, and many widely know that Kohberger is a pretty strict vegan, and I believe diet and exercise are contributing factors to helping to alleviate at least the symptoms. And so I think that's a reason. I can't say this definitively, but I believe that is a reason why he pursued vegetarianism and veganism.
Yeah. All right. So now we've gone through the part where the surviving roommates have kind of huddled together, and this is those several hours that pass before 911 is called.
Back to when Kohberger left the neighborhood. He drove a particular route that would exit onto a road that leads straight to Washington state line. And about that same time that Dylan runs to Beth's room, Kohberger is entering Washington state.
We don't know this. This is the part that you're talking about, right? This is all kind of blank because his phone is still off.
Correct. This is actually not the part that I would say is,
okay.
Speculation. Here, run that again. Actually, I want to point something out.
Sure.
If you can, to the point where the vehicle is, yeah. So right here, just run that and then maybe pause when he gets.
Several hours continuously tried contacting the other roommates. Back to when Kohberger left the neighborhood.
You tell me.
He drove a particular route that would exit onto a road that leads
pause
straight
when
to
she
Washington
pauses.
state line.
Okay.
And about that same time that Dylan runs to Beth's room,
Bang.
Kohberger is entering.
So we don't know the exact route that he took upon the exit, but that's a pretty convoluted set of streets. And I did what I called the Kohberger run. I did this more than once to try to figure out if the timelines matched up with how long it would take. Driving the speed limit is what I did. And I drove all the way back from the back area of this neighborhood and then drove all the way to Pullman based on what we knew from the probable cause affidavit pretty early in. I was not the only journalist to do this, but I wanted to see if the times matched up. We do know roughly these timeframes, though, as a result of getting the text messages and also the phone call log that the prosecution and the defense ended up filing court records over. So we do know roughly these timelines. Can we say that he crossed the state line at 4:27? No, but I think she even says roughly or approximately. And I think that's why she has that asterisk right there too.
Yeah.
But it is, narratively, it's brilliant the way she's presenting it, because by the time they realized he was already across the state line, how interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it works out to when we do know where he is, he kind of couldn't have gotten there any other way that makes sense and still fit the timeline.
Right. And Thompson mentioned in the hearing that he made the left onto Taylor, which is that exit route. It's one of the very few ways to exit that neighborhood if you're not going to make the right and basically go in to past the Sunshine Mart, which had the camera that also spotted the vehicle a couple different times, or onto the main drag toward the campus. And that is not the route he took. He definitely exited. He made that hard right turn where he almost crashed his vehicle, and then made the direct left turn and went the back route up the hillside just above the house, and then exited through the back neighborhood. That's what this is.
Interesting. Okay. And then we're going to get to another part here. I want to hear your thoughts.
Washington State. This is all part of Kohberger's pre-planning, including finding a place to stop and get rid of any evidence. This place here fits that planning. This area here, pointed out by the arrow, is a little group of trees with a small area that you can park a car on. This is what it looks like from the road. At 4:30 in the morning, while changing clothes and getting cleaned up at this location, one could feel completely safe while being able to see the headlights of a car coming from miles away.
talk to us about this, because this was, I thought, remarkable kind of police conjecture and perhaps prosecutorial argument, but I don't know if this is based on anything that we know. But I love her theory here.
Well, you heard her yourself. One could.
Yeah.
One could. Now, did police or some law enforcement personnel give that information to Dateline? And if that is their belief, wouldn't they have searched this area for any drops of blood, anything, finding a, I think she talks about how he could bury it there in a pre-dug hole.
Pre-dug hole, yeah.
Okay, and if that's the case, it wouldn't take that much to bring a metal detector out there and probably a cadaver dog to smell for any blood. So,
well, and also, how are they going to know that information unless it came from him? So, like, unless this is having spoken to him, this is a lot of, I think, again, based on really good kind of logical thinking, but still speculative.
Right. So I don't know if this is what he did. I don't know where he changed or at what point. But again, I'm going to get into the timeline, having made this drive myself. I don't remember these set of trees for whatever it's worth. Sure, one could stop there. You can see where there's a place to park and maybe quickly. I mean, they found his car to be spotless. You heard Bill Thompson say that it had been very ornately cleaned. And could he have changed right here? Sure, he changed somewhere, and they never found the knife. So is this where it is? I would speculate that's not the best place to put a knife within a what was it 10-minute drive of the home. Hard to say exactly, but I would think law enforcement has checked that vicinity, and we know that gentleman and his search team, I'm sure they've seen this video and also went out and looked, and they were unsuccessful. I saw the other day. So yes, could this have happened? Sure, but we don't know this, and it's an interesting theory.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to it, because she then picks up from stuff that we do know.
As this pivots around, you can see how this is out in the middle of nowhere. And a pre-dug hole near some of these trees would hide forever any evidence that Kohberger was trying to get rid of. It's important to remember that Kohberger was studying criminal behavior and the legal system. This would have motivated him to plan things to the smallest of details, like plastic on the seats to conceal DNA, or crossing state lines because the jurisdiction of one area would take hours to get assistance from the other. He's also smart enough to know that this 10-minute stop would likely never be on the radar of the authorities, especially after he crosses back into Idaho and then turns his phone back on. Let's pick back up where we left off at his 10-minute stop. He continues on with his plan, knowing that he's completely cleaned up and that there's no evidence to tie him to any of the crime if he were pulled over at this point. After getting on Highway 95 and turning south, he turns his phone back on at 4:48 a.m.
Okay, so that then begins where they actually do start to have information on where he was and what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I hate to, maybe I'll just get to the point. It took me 50 minutes to make this entire drive. And I believe he was gone for an hour 10. So this 10-minute window she's about to describe, and she's going to do the math two different ways. We're going to see it broken down on the left. She kind of gets to the exact same point within a minute. So it fits her theory, or the theory of whomever gave this to her. It is possible within the timeline. The thing I always wondered, having driven this and done it in 50 or so minutes, again, driving the speed limit, was what did he do with the other 10 or 15 minutes? That's what I always wondered, and we'll never have the answer, but or most likely will not. But yes, there was some sort of window of time where if you planned accordingly, you could unload things or get changed or whatever might happen.
I'm curious, while we have it paused here, we're showing a good outline of the path that both she and authorities now believe he took to get back to Pullman.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the most direct way? This
No.
seems like this big horseshoe pathway does not seem like the most direct way.
So this is a very rural area. Of course, the most direct way would have been to go back to campus and in town and take what is the highway. I believe it's Highway 8. Somebody correct me if they know. I'm almost certain it's 8, but it's a highway. It's the Moscow Pullman Highway, and you can drive. And that's the one that goes by the cannabis shop that's referenced and how they use the camera from there. And There's all sorts of businesses that they checked to see if there was any security footage of a vehicle. And this is it's not even the most direct route you can take on the backside to go through this rural stretch. There's actually a cutoff that where the phone is currently, where that symbol is, you could actually make a slight turn sooner and go quicker. He didn't for whatever reason, but there is a turnoff you could take to make it more efficient, but he did not. And I do wonder if it's because he was aware with either the cell tower locations based on his forensic understanding, or if he knew where maybe he got spooked by a security camera he saw somewhere and knew that he wanted to give himself his best chance to avoid detection. I'm not sure, but he did take sort of you could take an even longer route, but he took the not as efficient as possible route home to Pullman.
Interesting. And we're doing a lot of trying to put logic behind his actions. It could also be that he's not thinking at this point and is just kind of, randomly driving and missed a turn, kind of catching his own breath and just, doesn't realize how far he's driven before he needs to kind of make his way back.
Although how interesting, he did make a conscious choice on what time he either turned his phone back on or flipped it from airplane mode or whatever he was doing. He did that at a specific point. Does it mean that he was cognizant and aware that, well, once I get exactly to this point, I'm going to flip it on?
Yeah.
We don't know. But he did make a conscious choice to turn it on or turn airplane off, whatever it was, at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
This section of Kohberger's travels comes from his cell phone data extraction. Let's orientate ourselves onto this map and get a better understanding of the timing. Kohberger leaves Kings Road residence at 4:21 a.m. Just 8 minutes later, he arrives at his stopping point where he gets rid of all the evidence. After the cleanup, he then drives back into Idaho and turns his phone back on, which occurs near a town named Blaine. This was referenced in the arrest affidavit along with the next town called Uniontown. The last place to reference is where he's seen on cameras near his apartment at 5:25 a.m. Using Google tools, we can get accurate timing information. This entire route took 54 minutes. If we add the 10 minutes stopping time to that, it would be an hour and 4 minutes. Now, if you add that hour and 4 minutes to the time he left King Road, it would equal 5:25 a.m., the same time the camera captures him on the cameras near Washington State University. The last thing to compare is this part of the route, which has a reported time of 38 minutes to drive without any stopping. Bringing back the time record and adding in the second leg information of 38 minutes, we can now add that time to when he turned his phone back on, which was at 4:48 a.m. After adding the 38 minutes to that time, it gives us 5:26 a.m., nearly the same time that was captured on the campus cameras.
Like you said, that's the end of the video. So she kind of gets us to the same point two different ways. The ultimate conclusion being, though, to your point, there's an unaccounted for 10 minutes somewhere in there.
Yeah. And what he did in that time frame, we don't know. You're going to bring up this question that one of your viewers is referencing. But we know that the next day, Bryan Kohberger went back to the vicinity of the home, and they pointed out they don't know why. And he stayed for about 10 minutes, and they know that from cell phone data. But it's hard to say that. I mean, he pinged from the tower that the home uses, which is the 23 pings that Dateline first referenced and Bill Thompson talked about during the hearing. We know that much. We don't know that he was casing the house or surveilling them. Bill Thompson said himself, we don't know. But we do know that the next day he was near the home for 10 minutes, went back to Pullman, and then what he did was he went south to Lewiston, the Clarkston area. It's right again on the border. And many have speculated, and interestingly, Bill Thompson noted that is the confluence of the Clearwater and the Snake River. And he spent 3 hours there. They know it was him. He bought items that have always been undisclosed from the Albertsons. I don't know why you would travel 30 miles to go to a grocery store when you have many in town. We don't know what he bought. I'm 100% certain that Albertsons was able to retrieve the receipt. And they know it was him because he was walking out of his car on video surveillance. He was near a to-go coffee shop and a Chef's USA store. It was in the same parking lot. And then he went across the way and went to the Albertsons and bought something. But he spent 3 hours up there. And again, Bill Thompson, interestingly, during his comments in court the other day, the 15 minutes where he talked about the state's evidence, he talked about how that's the confluence of these two rivers between these two communities, and then he just let that hang.
Yeah, that was not a mistake. That was not just a factoid for all of our benefits. That I absolutely believe that that's what he was saying, was something, he was doing something at that location. And what else could he be doing? Why would you want to be around a body of water this close after having committed a murder with a knife that has never been recovered, but to dispose of that knife?
So there's other theories out there. I won't speculate myself, but I've read them, and Bill Thompson seemed to give them some credence.
You know, to this point about why did he return and what was he thinking? Why was he doing what he was doing? I've always thought, you know, if he is a criminology, you know, pursuing his doctorate in criminology, I have to imagine that he must have thought one of the first things that's going to happen after committing this murder is 911 is going to be called. And that crime scene is going to be an absolute, you know, every squad car in Moscow is going to be out at that crime scene. And it's going to start to be reported. It's going to start to hit the news that there's some big, you know, murder and there's nothing for hours. And I wonder if he went back out there to go, what the heck is going on? Are the cops even out there? He may, you know, he's out there before police have been called, and he sees there's no reaction. Where's the squad cars? Where's the ambulances? Where's all the investigators? Where's the crime scene tape? It's a completely quiet scene if he does in fact roll by it again. That must have been shocking to him.
Right. Another theory is that he, of course, realizes that he left the knife sheath, and maybe he played with the idea of going back to get it.
Yeah.
We don't know. We know the not speculation, but the allegation from the prosecution that he was very quickly in the days after back on Amazon searching, and I believe even putting in his cart the same knife and the same sheath, but did not purchase.
Yeah.
And was it a replacement? That's what they suggested.
He was thinking for a hot second, if I ever get stopped, if I ever get pulled over, if I'm ever a suspect, they're going to want to know, where is the knife sheath I purchased and why don't I still have it? And he thought maybe I should buy this. And then he probably went back and forth trying to decide whether or not to do that. Kevin, do you have time for a couple of questions? You've given us so much time tonight.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it's fun. It's such interesting stuff. There's so many questions that we still have no answers to. And that is the downside of not having the trial, of course, is, and the families have pointed this out. They want more information. They want to know why, first and foremost, and they want to know these specific details. And unfortunately, locking him away forever and having this admission and no appeals and no chance of parole, that was the thing they gave up.
If
not to mention the death penalty.
Yeah. If there's one thing that incredibly frustrates me about the plea, I know a lot of people are frustrated because they don't feel it's justice. I have said that I understand the prosecutors and why they did what they did, but I do wish that they had made some sort of proffer as a part of that, even if it was a interview that they had with him, so that they just would have more answers to all of this.
Do you think, Josh, that the judge will ask those sorts of questions at the sentencing on the 23rd?
I think if Bryan Kohberger doesn't want to ever speak again, that's the last we've ever heard from him. He's taken his plea. He said what he had to say. He'll have to sit through the sentencing. He'll have to sit and listen to the family members. He doesn't have to speak if he doesn't want to. If he chooses not to, that might be the last we ever hear from him on this whole thing, which is very frustrating to me. Therapists, ask the question that I get asked all the time. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If he didn't leave that knife sheath, would we be here today?
It's, the $1 million question. I think you pointed out that, and I defer to your legal acumen, they never bring charges. They never get an arrest warrant without the DNA. It's clearly the critical piece of information. Could police, over time, and it would have taken quite some time, could they have process of elimination figured out the vehicle? Could they have then triangulated that with cell phone data? They already knew that his phone didn't ping in the first 48 hours, which was the original search warrant from AT&T. So they didn't get any information there. But I think at some point they start broadening the investigation and figuring out, well, who was in the vicinity. And I don't know, I'm no police expert and I'm no crime detective, but I got to think that at some point we start learning more information. We learned that he got terminated from WSU. We learned that he had behavioral changes. We learn that he sold his vehicle maybe once he gets back to Pennsylvania, which was sort of a speculation. We already know that he changed his license plates. There was sort of a brilliance in that too. People think it was so stupid. I go the other direction. I say it was so smart that he did it along that timeline when his registration was coming up along his birthday. So he made the change and say, well, it was natural that I would wait until, as many of us do, until the deadline. And then I went and swapped a couple days early. And then he became a Washington plated vehicle. There's a brilliance to that. I don't think that's stupidity.
Yeah.
It didn't work to his favor because WSU police were patrolling the area and they noticed a vehicle that was registered to Pennsylvania was suddenly WSU. But let's say they don't do that until he leaves town. Well, they don't know that. I mean, they'll know the records, I suppose, at the DMV, but they're not going to spot the vehicle itself. And what if he never drives it back? So there's all these what ifs and questions about it. I have to believe in modern day policing. We've seen what it can do. And we look back and say, my God, this took them almost 7 weeks to solve. It took them only 7 weeks to solve. They had no idea.
Great point.
They had no idea. They had no idea.
This easily could have been a case that went on for years. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's such a good point. Sorry, finish your point.
Didn't I? I mean, gosh, I just read a stat that 58% of murders go unsolved.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, this is a quadruple homicide in a place where such a thing almost never happens. I mean, 4 deaths in Idaho is almost unheard of. And there was such scrutiny and attention, and the FBI was involved, and Idaho State Police almost immediately. I got to think that they would have put this together even if the sheath wasn't there. But, man, it made it a lot easier.
I don't know if I'm as confident as you are about it, because if the FBI had taken quite a few guesses to try to even figure out what that vehicle was. But let's say they do finally figure out what that vehicle is. Great. Now you're right. Now they're trying to reverse engineer anybody who ever had that vehicle. Pull all of the cell phone records from everybody who owned that vehicle. I mean, it's just when you think about the needle in the haystack type of stuff they would have had to pull off. Maybe, and let's say you're right. Let's say after all of that tenacious, dogged detective work, they narrow it down to Kohberger's, one of their top 10 suspects or something like that. What case do you have against him? You've got a guy who does a lot of bizarre, perhaps suspicious stuff, drives a similar car, does have his phone off during that time, was in that location 23 times prior, does, all of this other kind of stuff that you're like, okay. Maybe had they zeroed in on him and saw the Amazon purchase, maybe now they're having conversations about whether or not they file a case. But still, that case, without that DNA walking into court on that case, that is a very shaky case. So to therapists, question, would he have gotten away with it? It depends on gotten away with it, what you mean. Would he have maybe ever been arrested? I don't know. But would he have been convicted? Much more difficult question to answer.
Yeah, and I like how you went about that. I mean, I think about some of these major cases over the years. They had a familiarity with who their top suspects were, but they didn't have the goods in order to bring a case, at least not comfortably believing that they could get a successful prosecution and a conviction. So perhaps he could have been on the short list and long been labeled as a person of interest if they were ever to go public with that. But I think, you take it a step further, again, based on your legal expertise, that could they have gotten a conviction based around what was all circumstantial evidence outside of the DNA? And even that was somewhat circumstantial, right?
Yeah, even the DNA was not what we would call, I think it's stronger than a lot of people online have been trying to argue it is, because they're saying, oh, well, it's only touch DNA and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's some room for argument, at least even in that DNA, because we're not talking, again, blood spatter. that's like that person bled in that location. We're talking about, all we can say is that at some point in time, he either directly touched that button snap or touched somebody who touched that button snap, or and he touched an object that then transferred to that button snap. Still very powerful stuff, but yeah, room for argument in the hands of a skilled defense attorney. Let's take another couple questions here, and then I'm going to get you out of here, Kevin. CJ in LA says, how did he know where to go in the house? There is some information on this, right? There is an idea of, you were talking about, if you park at that location, what is your vantage point of the home?
Yeah, I mean, you can see in the video, if people want to go back to it. And again, I just want to applaud Amber. We'll pronounce it Mon, at Azget Industries. Unbelievable job. And she has all the sight lines and all that stuff. I can tell you, I've stood right there in that parking lot. It's correct. There's a photo my colleague Angela Palermo took that has that direct vantage when the home was still up from the back side, and you can see the police tape. It might be difficult to find, but we have that on the Statesman website, and Angela was the first of our reporters up there. She went to school up there and had a lot of familiarity. But yeah, I mean, it's just a beautiful job she did again. So we're grateful that we got to walk that through. But yeah, I mean, police have long said they believe that he had surveilled the property. And I can tell you that from my reporting, Bryan Kohberger was a part-time security officer for his former public school district a couple of years after he graduated, and was in that role for some time. So he wanted to be a police officer. That was sort of his dream for many years. And he learned these techniques and these skills. And so it's not a big leap to say, well, if he was in the vicinity 23 times, he has the ability to watch. His childhood friends told me more than once that they noticed that he had a very high level of observation skills. They knew it. He was skilled. He's on the autism spectrum. We know that now. It's been diagnosed by psychologists who were part of the defense team, and also the state got independent verification of these things. It was going to be used as an argument and was made an argument for preventing the death penalty. Judge Hippler didn't buy that, and it had no legal basis. We learned, because that was another pathway to no in terms of dumping the death penalty. But yeah, it's very possible he watched these people for some time. And just to make the point again, Bill Thompson said that each of those 23 pings in court the other day, he said each of those 23 pings was between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So again, it's not a big leap. Wow. Do we know it for sure? No, but it is alluded to in the probable cause affidavit when they referenced 12 or 13 pings. They developed more information over time ahead of trial. And between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., Bryan Kohberger was in the vicinity of that home. So he probably watched the people and the goings on.
Maybe even knew their patterns. Maybe even knew, was kind of timing out the patterns of when they typically go to bed. I don't know. Last question on this, and this is something we had missed, and I wanted to ask you about, because this was a mystery to me. But Farm Girl, one of our big time supporters, says, where did the quote unquote container come into play? Did she mention it and I missed it? This was one of the things that stood out to me in his recitation, was this mention, Thompson's statement in court, was this mention of the surviving roommate seeing him carrying some sort of container. And I think even somebody had described it as looking like a vacuum.
Yeah, gosh, we're jogging my memory pretty hard here, but the probable cause affidavit referenced something in his hand. And so again, if somebody knows that offhand, I'm failing before you in terms of the tiny detail I can't remember right now. But yes, Thompson spoke of a container that the second floor roommate witnessed him walking toward the slider on the second floor as he exited, perceived to have been through the slider. I guess the question is, where did the container come into play? But that is the reference. I don't recall her mentioning it in the video, but
she didn't mention it in the video. But I guess it's my question to you is, do we have any idea what that is at this point? Or have you heard speculation or anything about it?
No, I mean, I guess it could have just been him holding the knife or the knife in something. right? To
Yeah.
prevent additional splatter or what have you. That would be and that is genuine speculation, but I do recall the vacuum cleaner concept. And maybe it's kind of like one of those funnels from when you're trying to get in close rather than like a
That's what I
large
thought.
mechanism.
That's what I thought, is like not an actual vacuum cleaner. I feel like that would be pretty hard to miss, but maybe the nozzle end. Yeah.
And that was
It might
referenced
look
because
like a knife.
well, people were speculating that perhaps he brought some sort of device to do some initial cleaning. I personally would question that. I know that Steve Gonsalves has long referenced a kill kit, that Kohberger entered with a kill kit. I don't know what he's referencing specifically there, but he's long talked about that. But I mean, that could be just what you're wearing. It could be, I think there was speculation that he had bought a coverall from Dickies. And I believe that there was even or from Walmart, it was a Dickies brand. And I think there was a Walmart receipt that was retrieved either from his apartment or his car that included a Dickies purchase. And then, of course, when they were in his apartment, Bill Thompson referred to it as Spartan. They were not able to find anything of evidentiary value. So, yeah, the container. I mean, again, one of those questions, and it's dark. I would think that the second floor roommate she saw what she saw and she expressed that to police. But again, I will underscore she was right. Yeah. She was right, and she was proven right, despite any sort of disorientation or her frozen shock mode. She was able to give enough away to police that she nailed the bushy eyebrows. You can say what you want. I was going to
say all that bushy eyebrow talk, and she was right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I think credit to her. I know many people want to say, why didn't they make the call? And maybe that confused Kohberger too when he returned to the vicinity of the residence. How come the police aren't there? Or, the chaos that would ensue, obviously. But, we got where we are. He admitted that was him in the house, and she was right.
Yeah. Kevin, you're an absolute gentleman. I thank you so much for doing this. This was really fascinating for me to walk through that whole thing with you. So thank you again. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. I'm glad that we ran into each other finally up in Idaho. I'm sure you're going to be at the sentencing. I'm probably going to get sent up there again. That is set for
July 23rd at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So 11 a.m. Eastern and what was that, 8 Pacific?
Yeah, early. And then and knowing how it went for me last time, they'll probably have me up even earlier than that talking about it. But if I am up there, I'm going to bug you again, and I'll meet you at Percy. We'll have another drink at Percy.
Yeah, we'll bring the mics. New York Times mic and Fox News mic.
Yeah. Thank you so much, my friend. Idaho Statesman, follow Kevin there. But in the meantime, please, everybody, thank Kevin so much for spending some time with us. Appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. Wow. That was he said it more than once, but what a tremendous work. And I want to shout her out again. Tremendous job. I mean, first of all, the advancements in what they're able to do with this 3D rendering, but then just in her skilled hands to just make that whole thing come to life was amazing. So that is Azget Industries. Her YouTube channel is Azget FX. Her name is Amber Maune, Maune, and that is her company. Please go give her a shout out. Give her some support. If you go on her channel, let her know Courtroom Confidential says thank you so much for the work that she did. Let me give you guys some announcements and then get you guys out of here. First of all, MMB 157 says, that sounds like the name of a Russian submarine, says maybe the knife is not missing. Maybe he still has it. Could be the reason why he was looking for a sheath on Amazon. Could be. You're right. We're talking about the knife as if it's been disposed. That knife could be in his parents' home in Pennsylvania, for all we know. It could be hidden somewhere that they just haven't searched yet, and he knows exactly where it is, and it's not in the bottom of a river or buried in the ground. And I just hope that we will find out one day. And thank you so much again, MMB 157. All right. Are you guys going to CrimeCon? Well, Zachary, says Thompson said KB returned to the scene around 9:30 a.m. and stayed 10 or so minutes. Footage from the cam next door makes if he pulled onto Queens Road. Return to the scene. Oh, yeah. The footage of him returning to the scene. Sure. That could exist too. And that's interesting that we haven't seen that. That may exist, and it may just not be part of the information that this Dateline episode or this woman, Amber Azget, received. Mary Fry says, wonder if law enforcement showed BK and his team this footage along with law enforcement having his DNA he gave up. If the DNA had all this, why accept a plea? I don't think they did at all. What you're talking about, Mary, is what we sometimes describe as a reverse proffer, where you sit down with the defendant and you show them everything you've got in the hopes of them kind of flipping on themselves and changing their mind and cooperating and taking a plea. I don't think that occurred at all. I don't think they've had a conversation with him at all. I think what happened was that the defense ran out of arguments. They finally tried their alternate perpetrator, lost, and that was it. That was the end of it for them. And they turned to him and they said, hey, now's the time to make a decision on this. You're going to trial. You're likely going to get convicted. And if you are convicted, you're likely going to the death chamber. So what do you want to do? Pat Brooks, thank you so much for becoming a member. Birdie284, thank you for the super sticker. Johnny Knoxville says, it's nice to see all the weird people who question Dylan's account eat a healthy portion of crow. She was 100% credible. She absolutely was. She absolutely was. Kevin made that point more than once. Best Nancy, thank you for gifting the membership. Farm Girl, the same, for gifting a membership. You guys are all so generous, and I appreciate you being here. Yvonne says, lights are on, and 2 minutes later, lights are off. Did he think they were asleep? This was the question I think I saw earlier that was such a good point, Yvonne. Did he know? Did he see the DoorDash driver? Did he see the lights on? Did he decide to come into the home that quickly after? Was he growing impatient, or do we not know any of that? Or were the lights off? You know what I mean? It could have been that he was driving by, saw dark lights, kept on thinking, well, I'm going to give it a few more minutes, goes by, see darks, continues to see the lights off, doesn't ever see the DoorDash driver, and decides to go in when he thinks it's safe, because otherwise it does seem like he went in when there was activity in that home, which would not make sense. So thank you for that, Yvonne. Thank you, Kevin and super mods and crew. Great job. I'll be watching this again. So much good commentary. Thank you, D Bullard, for that. All right, to my announcements. CrimeCon. Are you guys going? The answer is yes, you are going. You are going this September 5th through 7th in Denver. And the reason you're going is we called up CrimeCon and we demanded that they give us a discount code, and they did. And that discount code is Courtroom, all caps, all one word. Enter Courtroom to get 10% at checkout on your tickets for CrimeCon. Would love to see you all there. We're going to have an absolute blast. We hit 39,000 subscribers today. How fantastic. Thank you guys all for that. Let me just verify this myself. Fantastic. Thank you all for making that happen this evening. What a fun I always love when we hit a little milestone while we're on a live. So thank you guys for that. What you missed this week, Saturday, we had our weekly roundup. Don't ever miss the weekly roundup. We give you all the updates on all the true crime news that you've been following. Of course, we talked about Kohberger. Of course, we talked about Sean Combs, but there was also updates with Stephen Stearns and Corey Richens and a bunch of other cases. So check that out. It's up on our channel now. And then you may have missed Sunday Fun Day, and I hope that you didn't, because we all had a blast, and you guys should be there the next Sunday. We answered questions that you guys left us at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Leave us a message. We will answer them live every Sunday from 9 a.m. Pacific. That is noon Eastern. Be there, and we have a really good time. It's becoming my favorite thing that we do on this channel, is answering your questions every Sunday Fun Day. Stay tuned this week, Wednesday. If you thought tonight was great, which it absolutely was, we're following it up with another fantastic guest. We are having Brian Entin from News Nation. He is going to come on to talk to us about Kohberger again. Brian Entin is the one who broke the news before anybody that Kohberger was taking a plea. I will never forget this moment. We were getting ready for a Monday night live with Kevin Fixler. I was trying to figure out what to talk to him about. We were going to talk about some other Kohberger news, and then Tiffany gasps from the other room and says, Kohberger's taking a plea. And I said, no, he's not. That's not true. Can't be true. I said, where are you hearing that? She said, Twitter. I said, Twitter's full of nuts. Who said it? And she said, Brian Enton. And I went, oh boy. Well, then that's got to be true. And he reported this about 20 minutes before any of the major networks started reporting it. So we're going to have him on Wednesday to get his reactions, talk about the aftermath and all of that. That's this Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, right back here on this channel. And then we are trying to pick the next case for our Courtroom Confidential live trials. And the next thing coming up is jury selection on the James Craig case. This is the Colorado dentist who has been accused of poisoning his wife. And then if that wasn't enough, he decided that he's going to try to kill the detective who has been investigating him and maybe plant some evidence. Wild dude. Wild. What this guy, a dentist, decided to the turns he decided to take in his life. We did do a case notes episode on this. If you want to check it out, get caught up on it. Jury selection is set to begin this Thursday, and then the opening statements and closing arguments will be live streamed, and we will be showing that to you. But the trial itself, unfortunately, will not. But we are going to have that coming up on our Courtroom Confidential live trials channel. That's our sister channel. If you're not subscribed there, please do subscribe. Set notifications so you don't miss anything. That's all the announcements I got for you. Of course, go to thecourtroomconfidential.com if you want to find out about membership, if you want to leave us a message for Sunday Fun Day, if you want to buy merch. What am I wearing tonight? What is this? What color is this, Kaylin? Come on, Kaylin. You knew I was going to ask you this question. This is not seafoam. I think it's, what is it? Rustic forest. She's got the thing in front of me. Dark green. Boring name. Love this. Light green. Ooh, a fight between Kaylin and Tiffany. Dark green and light green. Whatever it is, it's one of my favorite colors that we have. Check that out. You can buy the merch. Somebody's saying sage. I like that. Seafoam. I don't know if this is the seafoam. Check that out. You can buy it, though, on our website, thecourtroomconfidential.com. Just hit on the shop button. Thank you again to Kevin Fixler. Such a fantastic dude. Appreciate all his insights and work and just being so available to us whenever he has a chance. So big shout out to him, and a big shout out to Kaylin and Tiffany for making everything possible, and to our mods, Afton, Shy Gal, and Kathy. Again, before we go, our hearts and prayers go out to those who are suffering from the incredible tragedy taking place in Texas. But we thank you all for being here with us on a Monday night, and we will see you all again soon this coming Wednesday. Please don't miss out. Take care, everybody.